Hello, in this video I'm going to go over weapon traits for each role in the Elder Scrolls Online PvE Dungeons and Trials. If you're doing Overland or PvP, then those are going to be different based on what your build is or needs. So I'm just going to do group PvE content, being Dungeons, Trials, and Arenas. So let's talk about tanks first. I recommend a sword and board on the front bar for tanks. And because the resistance cap is so easy to get to now, you literally only need to be using the Soldier of Apocrypha skill line with one piece of reinforced chest, and you can literally get to the resistance cap with just that. So with that in mind, I'm going to recommend that for the front bar. I would recommend, well, the weapon doesn't matter. It can be a mace, an axe, whatever. That doesn't matter. But the trait needs to be, I would recommend doing Decisive. And what that will do is that will increase your ultimate that you gain. When you gold this out, for example, you'll get a 27% chance to gain an additional ultimate every time you gain an ultimate. So essentially this will proc in a various amount of times, because there's no cooldown for this. So this will speed up your ultimate generation, especially as a main tank. That's going to be really helpful. If you don't really need ultimate, I don't really know what build that would be, but probably the next best one would be charged, so that you can apply status effects to the enemy that would help debuff, possibly powered to increase your heals. But that's pretty much the three traits that I'm going to recommend for the sword. Decisive is probably in first place by quite a large margin there. Second being charged, and then a distant third would be powered. There's just better ways of boosting your heals than to choose this trait for a 4.5% increase in heals is really not going to be a game changer. Although the chance to gain an extra ultimate every time you gain ultimate, that can stack up quite a lot, especially with no cooldown. But that's the tank front bar. Really quickly, I will talk about back bar weapons. In my opinion, every role should have an infused back bar. And why do I say that? Well, on a DPS, for example, you're going to put a weapon damage glyph on your back bar. And what that does is, when you lay down a wall of elements or blockade with this weapon, that skill is going to proc this weapon enchant while you're even on your front bar. And so an infused glyph is going to increase the potency of the glyph as well as reduce the cooldown. Now, a standard cooldown for a glyph is 10 seconds. And what the infused trait does is it cuts it in half so that you can reactivate it and have a 100% uptime on your weapon glyph on your back bar. And so that's why the weapon glyph on the back bar is so powerful with an infused staff. It's going to give you essentially 100% uptime on a unique 452 weapon damage glyph. And that's why that is important on your build. For a tank, it used to be that they used to run Crusher on the back bar. However, because penetration is so high on DPS, and the resistances are essentially handled with major and minor resolve. I would highly recommend using the runic sunder for a taunt. That's going to get you the rest of the way for stripping the armor 100% of the way. Then you don't need an infused crusher on the back bar. You can do something else. And what I like to do is I like to put a stamina glyph on there. So that gives me an extra passive way of obtaining stamina back on my tanks. So that helps with the stamina sustain also. All you have to do is keep your wall of elements laid down, and you're going to basically restore stamina passively as long as you keep that up with the infused staff. With healers, what I like to run is the weakening glyph, and when you infuse this, it'll go up to 452, and it's a unique stripping of a weapon damage that will stack with both major, minor, and maim, and also major and minor cowardice, because those are named buffs and this is not. So that's how I handle the back bar weapons on those rolls. Now getting back into the swing of things, healers, resto stabs. There's a little bit of a different situation now in update 46 and 47. Essentially, you can really up the effectiveness of your healer build, and basically the powered trait, I think, has lost a little bit of its muster, because, like, for example, on my healer build, I can stack class skill lines that have healing done buffs in them, and so I can get my healing done percentages up extremely high, much higher than they used to be. And so this may not be as optimal of a trait to use. By all means, use it. It's still really good. However, you could try putting on a precise weapon on the front bar, which will increase your chance to critically strike on your heals. That's going to give you at least no less than a 50% increase on your healing done when it does critically hit. You could again also do a decisive one. That will give you a 55% chance. This is probably going to proc a great deal because it's a two-handed weapon. If you're on a build that needs to get ultimate back quickly, this would be a great way to kind of buff that up and get things, like, for example, if you've got major heroism ticking a lot, this is going to increase quite a bit. Charged is probably not that important because you're not really going to apply a whole lot of status effects as a healer other than maybe chilled, but chilled is probably going to be handled already in your group, so I wouldn't recommend that. So powered and decisive and precise are probably your big three to choose from. Just depends on what you need in your build, but those are going to be the top performing traits. I would say they're probably a lot closer than they used to be. Powered has always been kind of the go-to to make sure that you get a really good amount of heals in, especially if you're going into hard modes. Like I said, though, if you can stack some healer lines that have healing done bonuses in them, this loses its importance a little bit, and you might want to lean into a little bit more on precise or decisive, depending on what your build needs. And now lastly, the DPS front bar. I will say, if you're not, for some reason, if you're not using dual wield daggers, then we'll talk about bows, destruction staves, and two-handed weapons. those you're all going to want to pick a precise weapon, and I'll go over into the weapon passives and cover why that's important. The two-handed weapon skill line doesn't have any critical chance in it. Here's the different types of weapons you can have for two-handed. You can get increased weapon damage with a two-handed sword, increased critical damage from the axe, and penetration from a mace. There's no critical chance here. And so the reason why you want to have a front bar precise weapon with a two-hand is because you need to increase how often you critically strike on your build. That is the most powerful component that you can add to your build as a DPS. So this is one of the ways you can kind of remind yourself, if just look at what's missing here and then add another component that's not present. So dual wield, if you're picking two-handed daggers, you already get, if you can look at the very bottom here, you already get critical chance by hand using daggers. And so that's why we use a different trait than the other weapons do, because the critical chance is already present. So when you're building daggers for trash rather, you typically go with a Nirnhoned and a charged, and that increases your AoE damage. When you get into a one-on-one fight with a single target, you're going to want to go with two charged daggers, and you can set that up in sort of a boss build somewhat, now that we have the Wizard's Wardrobe working, you can implement that into your inventory. And what the reason why that has changed is because back in, I don't remember the specific update. I know it was last year, maybe the year and a half or so ago. They had an update where they increased all of the damage that the status effects do, because all of the other status effects were trailing behind burning so badly. They literally increased every other status effect in the game by about double the amount that it was doing. And burning is still, by the way, the top damage dealing status effect, with the exception of when you get 3 stacks of hemorrhaging. If you get 3 stacks of hemorrhaging up, then that hits harder than burning. However, that can be difficult to achieve depending on what your build is. But burning is basically the baseline for what they changed all these other status effects to. They literally they increased over 100% on most of these. So that's why the charged weapon on the front bar for the dual wield daggers and going for boss fights and single target, that is why that has become so much more optimal than in the past, is because they increased status effects to a great deal. So that is what we use with daggers and why we do that. If you're running any other type of weapon, you need to look at running precise, because that's going to increase your critical strike chance. So I've done two-handed, there's dual wield. Here's bow. The bow has some critical chance, but you have to be further than 15 meters away. So in a lot of times in trials and dungeons, you can't really stand that far away because your group needs to be stacked up. So it's kind of going to put you in an odd position, especially if you're in a group that has a lot of dual wield dagger wielding DPS. Say that 5 times fast. You need to be close in and standing with everybody so your healers can hit you all at once. If you're more than 15 meters away, then this is going to give you critical chance, but it'll shut off as soon as you go inside that 15 meters. And that's quite a ways away. I mean, there's a lot of skills that won't even hit from that far out. So For example, this right here, this biting jabs only has an 8-meter depth. So if you need to stand that far away with a bow, you can't use this as your spammable. So you'd be forced to run something with like snipe or something like that that's got some range to it. So just keep that in mind. If you have a bow equipped, then you will get this that's flat bonus, but this right here is kind of an iffy situation. But this right here will give you critical chance without any condition, which is good. If you are in a situation that you are going to be far enough away, then maybe the front bar precise is not your thing, but I would recommend kind of analyzing that overall. In most cases, I don't think you're probably going to be outside of that 15-meter radius. So that right there would be a thing to pay attention to. The destruction staff. If you have a lightning staff, you get increased direct damage and damage over time for flame. There's a penetration there. This right here is an increase to status effects already. So you already have basically almost a charged weapon increase, not quite the value of a two-handed weapon does, but there's already a component here to increase your status effect application. So that's why we need to have a precise front bar if you're doing a staff of some kind, because you need to increase the amount that you critically strike. Let me just equip a front bar Inferno staff real quickly, and I can show you my critical chance goes down to 21.5. Okay, so if I reapply the daggers that I had on, now you can see it goes up to almost 28. So that's going to increase how often you critically strike. So that's why you need to do that when you're running a distro staff, because there's no critical chance here in the toolkit. So you need to make sure that critical striking is, like I said earlier, that's the most potent way you can increase your damage, is increase how often you critically strike. After that, it's then weapon damage, and then after that, it's maximum stats here, either your magicka or your stamina. Those are basically the top three in terms of adding to your kit. So that's kind of an easy way you can find what sets are going to do more damage. If they've got critical chance in there, those are going to be more potent than when you see like a line of max magicka or something like that. The one that has critical chance is going to probably hit harder in most cases. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to end the video here. Thank you for watching. If you thought this video was helpful or interesting, please check out my YouTube channel and go down to my created playlists for all of my organized Elder Scrolls Online content. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.